Look around you, we are already cyborgs, we just have to hold the device in our hands. But that is about to change, the screen is dead. The applications on your phone were not built simply to help you, they were built to keep you. The designers and engineers behind these apps are masters of human psychology. They have studied the intricate pathways of the brain's reward system, the same system that governs hunger, desire, pleasure. They use this knowledge to build features that trigger a small release of a chemical called dopamine. Every notification, every like, every colorful animation is a carefully crafted stimulus designed to make you feel a momentary sense of reward. This creates a powerful feedback loop, a craving that makes you want to come back for more, again and again. These techniques are not subtle, they are borrowed directly from the world of gambling. The variable reward schedule of a slot machine has been perfected in the form of the social media feed. When you pull down to refresh your timeline, you don't know what you will get. It might be something boring, or it might be a wonderful photo, an important message, or a viral video. This unpredictability is the key. It makes the act of checking your phone a perpetual gamble, a habit that becomes deeply ingrained in your behavior, often without your conscious consent. This is not a failure of willpower on your part. It is the result of a deliberate and highly sophisticated design strategy. The bright colors, the satisfying swoosh of a sent message, the red dot of a new notification, all are engineered to capture your attention and create a sense of urgency. This constant stimulation is incredibly effective at breaking our focus and shortening our attention spans. We find it harder to read long articles, to sit through a movie without checking our device, or to simply be alone with our thoughts. Behind this entire system is a powerful business model that treats your attention as a commodity. In this economy, your time is the product being sold. The longer you stay engaged, the more ads you are shown. The more you interact, the more data is collected about your habits, your preferences, your relationships. Addiction is not an unfortunate side effect. It is the central pillar of a multi-billion-dollar industry. The system is designed to be addictive because addiction is profitable. The consequences of this engineered addiction extend far beyond our fractured attention spans. They reach into the very core of our social fabric, creating a profound and unsettling paradox. We have never been more connected in the history of civilization. We can communicate instantly with people across the globe. We can share our lives with thousands of friends. We can access a near infinite library of human knowledge. Yet, despite this unprecedented level of connectivity, we are becoming known as the loneliest generation. The digital connections we forge often lack the depth, warmth, and substance of real human interaction, leaving us feeling isolated even when surrounded by a crowd. We see picture-perfect lives on our feeds, and it breeds envy, anxiety, inadequacy. We compare our messy reality to their polished highlight reels, forgetting it is a performance. We send a text instead of making a call. We like a post instead of offering a hug or a listening ear. We have substituted low-bandwidth digital chatter for the nuanced, emotionally resonant experience of being physically present. This has been devastating for children and teenagers growing up in this environment. Their social and emotional skills are being shaped by algorithms. They learn status through likes and follower counts. They feel the sting of exclusion not on the playground, but by being left out of a group chat, or seeing photos of friends gathered without them. Rates of anxiety and depression have skyrocketed among young people under this pressure to maintain a perfect online persona. The cycle continues night after night, in rooms lit only by the cold glow of a screen. We scroll endlessly, consuming but never satisfied, a hollow form of engagement to numb the feeling of being alone. We are a generation connected by glass and light, yet many have never felt more alone. The technology promised to bring us closer, but for too many it has become a wall, separating us from each other, and from the richness of the world right in front of us. Connected. Isolated. As we prepare for what comes next, we must ask what we have learned from the age of the smartphone. The patterns of addiction and isolation were not accidents, they were features. We must proceed with our eyes open. The escape from the tyranny of the small screen is underway, but its first steps are clumsy and awkward. Devices like the Apple Vision Pro and the Meta Quest represent the very beginning of this new era. In early 2026, they are heavy, expensive, socially awkward. No one wears them all day. They tether you to virtual worlds or awkward blends with your surroundings. These headsets are the brick phones of our time, cumbersome predecessors to sleek, lightweight devices that will become ubiquitous. Early systems are proofs of concept, showing we can place digital objects in physical space and interact with data in 3 dimensions. Our environment becomes an interactive canvas. The goal is not VR isolation but spatial computing, overlaying the digital world onto the real. Look at a plant and see its name. Cook with steps on your counter. Walk a city guided by glowing arrows under your feet. You no longer look down to navigate, translate, or learn. Information appears contextually, right where you need it, integrated into your field of view. This shift demands rethinking how we design software and how we interact with technology. The race is on to make devices smaller, lighter, and more powerful. Soon the headset disappears, and only the experience remains. We will look through screens, not at them. The separate digital and real worlds begin to dissolve. But this promise carries a warning. The lines between human and machine, and private and public, will blur. We must proceed with our eyes open. As we grow accustomed to smart glasses, the technology will take a more intimate leap forward. Companies like Mojo Vision have built and tested prototypes. This is no longer science fiction. Drew Perkins became the first person to wear one, demonstrating a future with the display not in front of your eye, but directly on it. A microscopic marvel, over 14,000 pixels per inch in a form factor under half a millimeter. It sits like a normal lens, powered wirelessly, projecting information onto your retina. Imagine turn-by-turn directions as a faint line on the road. Imagine seeing your notes, invisible to the audience. For people with visual impairments, the promise is monumental, restoring or enhancing sight. Athletes see biometrics without glancing away. Surgeons overlay scans directly onto the operating field. The need to look away vanishes, creating a seamless flow of information. The ultimate promise, a frictionless interface, technology as an extension of your senses. But the eye is delicate. Safety, comfort, and long-term health are monumental challenges. Early tests have been limited, one lens at a time, for an hour. Years of refinement and rigorous trials lie ahead before mass market readiness. The next interface will not just be wearable, it will be invisible. If a smart contact can record video, how will you ever know you are being filmed? Traditional privacy relies on visible cameras. That idea becomes obsolete overnight. Any conversation, any transaction, any moment in public could be recorded without your knowledge or consent. When cameras are undetectable, our social cues disappear. An unblinking eye becomes an unblinking lens. This asymmetry chills expression and trust. Will we become more guarded, less spontaneous, less authentic? The law moves more slowly than technology and is unprepared. Our frameworks were built for visible devices. Debates about city cameras and doorbells will seem quaint. How do you regulate a device indistinguishable from the human eye? How do you enforce consent when recording is imperceptible? These questions will be answered in everyday interactions, not courts. The promise of convenience is powerful. The ability to capture a memory or look up information without lifting a finger. But the convenience may cost our collective privacy. Society must grapple with this trade-off. We need urgent conversations, legal and social. But technology does not wait. It pushes forward. If we are not careful, we will live in total surveillance. Not imposed by a government, but adopted willingly, one contact lens at a time. Silent beat. Beyond glasses and contacts lies the final frontier, the direct connection of brain to computer. Brain-computer interfaces are not worn, they are implanted. Tiny chips with hair-thin electrodes, surgically placed to read and eventually write neural signals. This has entered human trials. By late 2025, Neuralink had implanted a small number of patients, with plans for dozens more. By reading intent to move, a person can control a cursor or type with thought alone. For someone trapped in a non-responsive body, this is a miraculous return to communication. One participant described going back to school, building a business, and communicating in ways impossible before, proof of technology's power to heal and empower. Neuralink plans 2026 trials for a blind sight implant, bypassing the eyes to feed video into the visual cortex. Early results could be crude, simple shapes, basic navigation, but for someone in total darkness, it is life-altering. This is technology at its most noble, mending what is broken. Yet the line between therapy and enhancement is thin. If we can restore memory, could we grant photographic memory? If we can speed communication, could we accelerate thoughts? Do we risk a new inequality, a cognitive arms race with AI inside our skulls? Merging with AI might be our way to survive, yet what do we lose in the process? The smartphone will not vanish tomorrow, but its slow decline is inevitable. In a decade, we will see it as quaint, like the landline, or a stone tablet. Our primary interface will merge with perception, seen through lightweight glasses, worn invisibly on our eyes, and perhaps one day connected to our very thoughts. This future arrives piece by piece. It holds wonder and danger. It can heal and empower. It can also deepen loneliness, obliterate privacy, and sell our attention. These are choices for all of us. Who writes the code? Who owns the data? Who holds the power to turn it off? The smartphone will look like a stone tablet in 10 years. The question isn't if you will upgrade, it's how much of your humanity you will trade for convenience.